want to welcome everybody back to the channel. Today, I have to say, I've never been as excited as I am to introduce this legendary man. I know David doesn't like it when I say legendary, but I'm going to have to give him his flowers here. His name is Rabbi David Mivasair. He's part of the active member of Independent Jewish Voices of Canada, and also an active member of Jewish Voice for Peace. And something I would really like to say, David, if you don't mind, you lived in Israel as well for a few years. You said 4 years. Is that correct?
That's right.
So I would love to hear your take on it, David. I would love to start it off with one of my biggest things is starting off the conversation in the West Bank. I know everybody loves to start it off with October 7th in Gaza, but I would love to be able to start it off there where there was 507 Palestinians killed in the West Bank in 2023. So, and 81 of them were children. So that's where I'd love to start it off with you.
Yeah, well, that's important to know, that this oppression has been going on for, I'd say, more than 75 years.
So
right?
in your take, since you lived there for 4 years, where were you exactly?
That's a good question. So when I was 19 years old, I was growing up in the USA. I was going into my second year of university, and I wanted to see with my own eyes and be there myself. So I spent a year in Jerusalem as a second year university student.
Huh.
And I was at the Hebrew University. To be even more specific, I lived in dormitories that were built. They weren't even finished being built when I moved in, but they were on Mount Scopus, which it's kind of like just where the rise of the land that goes up to Jerusalem starts to fall back off again and go down to the Jordan Valley. So I lived in a place where I could look out one way and I could see Jerusalem and all like the Jewish development, and look out the other way, and it was I could say it looked empty. It was like desert or wilderness, but actually, in fact, a lot of people lived there, Bedouin and other Palestinians. And through the course of that year of living in Jerusalem, I got to know a lot about that. Then that was 1971-72. 1973, I went to be a school teacher in two small villages next to Tiberias, which is a city in the north. You could say it's in the Galilee. It's right on the shore of the Sea of Galilee.
Okay.
I was there for a year, and then 2 other years I was back in Jerusalem for another whole year, and that went into like around 1990. I was there for a year, and then again 10 years later, 2000, 2001, I was there for a year. And then you said the West Bank. So I went back again in 2017 and again in 2019.
Wow, very recent.
I'm sorry?
Very recent.
2017, 2019. I was there again last summer. But in 2017, 2019, I went with a group of Jewish people, mostly from North America. I went in 2017 with 120 other Jews going to support Palestinians.
Wow.
In their villages, in their neighborhoods, to be in solidarity with them. We called it, instead of coexistence, we called it co-resistance. And I'd say in some cases, used ourselves as human shields to protect them from very violent settlers and, of course, Israeli military.
That's amazing.
So I was there for 3 weeks in 2017.
I would love to hear about that experience.
I could talk more about that.
I would
You
love
asked
to.
me, like, where was I? And then 2019, I went back to the same places. I have relationships with those people. I still am in touch with them. And you were just referring to the violence, like lethal violence of and by Jews against Palestinians in the West Bank that's going on daily in many, many, many places. And there were, I'd say, people like me Jewish people from America. I happen to have moved to Canada, so I've been in Canada now for almost 30 years, but I'm still very much American. But anyway, who
Where in America did you live in?
I grew up in Baltimore,
Baltimore.
and then I lived in Philadelphia when I was going to rabbinical school. And then I served as a rabbi in the center of Pennsylvania in a town called State College, which is where Penn State University is.
Okay.
But I wanted to say, I'd say there were people like me who feel very connected to what's going on there, have lived there, know about it, have been involved politically, all the political involvement, all these years and years and years. Sometimes it's very hard to see the outcomes. Like, what effect are we really having? Things don't seem to be getting better. And some of us started thinking, go there and be there with these Palestinians on the land in their homes and help them show up as Jews.
Incredible.
Even more so, Jews from America, Jews from Canada, Jews from the UK, and use ourselves to support them with our social media, with our English language skills, and even just being present means that the level of violence de-escalates because we're there, right? We're witnessing what's going on, and
That's
we're even
correct.
physically in the way. So if Israelis are trying to do something violent to Palestinians, I'm not a big fighter, but they have to get past me. They have to if I'm in the way, they're not going to do as much as if I wasn't there. So we did that. And that is still going on. That organization is called Center for Jewish Nonviolence. And people could look it up, Center for Jewish Nonviolence.
We're
and
definitely going to put the links.
It's still ongoing.
Can I start
Anyway,
somewhere with you, David? I'm very curious, to be very honest with you. When it comes to, I really wanted to be able to showcase what the difference is between, because I want to get to your experiences, but I really want people to understand that there's an incredible difference between Zionism and true Judaism. So if you can start off
sure.
explaining what is the Zionism movement.
So Zionism is a political ideology that developed very late in the 1800s. People started writing about it and trying to popularize it really in the 1880s. By the 1890s, they managed to organize a thing they called the World Zionist Congress that maybe a couple hundred people went to. But my point there is it's a political ideology that began about 130 years ago.
So what are they? What
Which
is
is
their
actually,
agenda?
it's around the time my grandfather was born.
There you go.
And before that, it wasn't a thing. It didn't exist. And even when it got started, very few Jews supported it. So the operative idea of Zionism, or the way Zionism manifested into the world, was to create a Jewish state for the Jewish people, with the idea that Jews should live there. And the place to do that is our ancient homeland. I think there's no doubt at all that ancient Jews lived there. That's where the Bible was written. The stuff going on in the Bible takes place there.
When they
The
escaped the
language,
Pharaoh.
the Bible's written in Hebrew. That's the Jewish ancient language. And we've maintained that language ever since then. So there's no question that Jews used to live there. So in the late 1890s, mostly as a reaction to horrible conditions and anti-Semitism in Europe, and as a reaction to the rise of nationalism in Europe by different national groups, some Jews started thinking, oh, the solution to our problems is to have our own country. And of course, you've heard this ridiculous and false slogan, a land without a people for a people without a land. The Jews were the people without a land because we lived scattered all over the place. So that part's true. But it wasn't a land without a people. It was a land that people lived in, and had their lives and their homes and their churches and their mosques and their schools and farms and everything. Hundreds of thousands of Palestinians lived there. And there's even a famous thing where the early Zionist movement, all these Jews were living in Europe and they were having ideas, so they sent like a delegation to go check it out. And the delegation came back and they said, truly, the bride is beautiful, but she's already married to another man. That's a metaphor. It's like, yes, Palestine, it's a beautiful place, but wait a minute, somebody else already got it.
Yeah.
So the Zionist movement was started a little more than 100 years ago. It was all about, I honestly think there's a lot of kind of good intentions, like all the Jews are scattered in so many places and they're very victimized. They're very powerless. There were mass murders of Jews that happened over and over again.
Which is true.
That's why my ancestors came to America. We fled. So there, wasn't like out of a vacuum or coming from evil intentions. Like in their own minds, they thought they were doing something good. But the consequences have been absolutely disastrous in many ways. And so you asked, you wanted to talk about Judaism and Zionism. You asked me about Zionism. So Zionism resulted in the state of Israel, which I don't think ever would have happened if it hadn't been for the Holocaust. Not that many Jews were interested in actually going to live there. Not that many Jews supported it politically or ideologically.
I saw
And
many
because of,
pictures of the Jews who were arriving on boats with big banners, and they were saying, "Don't crush our hopes and dreams." And of course, historically, Jews have always gotten along with Muslims, and at the same time, very well protected. We always took care of one another. Even I have relatives that are in Palestine because I'm Lebanese Palestinian, and even my best friends here, Jews, and I love them to death. And I've never met more lovely people. But I always knew that there was such a massive difference between the Zionistic movement today and then, of course, what Judaism. And I feel like they've intertwined it. So then now they're trying to tell people almost. That's why I wanted your opinion on it, because I feel like as if they've almost pushed the envelope in terms of merging Zionism and Judaism together when they're very separate things. Judaism is a beautiful religion, and the other one is a movement.
you're quite right.
So
And
yeah, so
actually, that's been like a kind of a progression over the last few decades. Like when I grew up in Baltimore in the 1950s, the 1960s, our Judaism didn't have hardly anything to do with Israel. Like
yeah.
Israel was there, we knew it was there, but our Judaism was very much here. And I would just say in the last 50 years, it's almost like I'll just say it. I mean, I've said it many times. I think Judaism has been occupied by Zionism.
Wow, that's beautiful.
You know
It's a beautiful way
that,
to put it.
and virtually all synagogues everywhere are so devoted to supporting Israel with a ferocity, in a kind of an exclusive way that, for example, I, who am a rabbi,
Yes.
I'm not really welcomed in synagogues, and if I go to a synagogue to pray, I feel like this whole place is actually very much about supporting something that is so immoral. It's so wrong. And so I'll just say again, like in the last few decades, since I've been an adult, like I can remember, I can see the progression of how this happened. Most Jewish religious institutions have been really taken over by Zionism, and many of us, people like me, have just left. Um,
You've been shunned out of your
yeah.
community every time you speak up.
In one way, that's very, very true. But in another way, there's a different community, right? So I'm part of a community. Actually, the first thing you said, I'm an active member of
Yes.
Independent Jewish Voices in Canada. And that's my community. And it's not a religious community, right? We don't pray together. We don't, I don't know, read Torah together.
Yeah.
But I feel like we're doing it. It's like we're walking the walk. That's what needs to be done in this world today. I think every Jewish person in Independent Jewish Voices feels like this is an absolute moral obligation for me to do this as a Jew, right? And that's the people I really feel in community with.
Speaking
And
of the Torah,
yeah,
Mr. David, I got a question for you. I see a lot of videos of rabbis saying that what they're doing in Palestine is wrong because it doesn't say that in the Torah, that it's their land. So I always got a little confused because one section says that basically this is our holy promised land, and the other one say that's actually completely false. It does not say that in the Torah.
welcome to Jewish life.
Does that
You
what
know
is it
that expression?
sectarian?
Seriously. You know the expression, two Jews, three opinions?
That's the first time I heard it, but it
You've
makes
ever, it's the first time? Okay, so among us Jews, that's pretty known. Two Jews, three opinions. Like, who do you ever agree with? Right? So, I was just saying how the religion's been taken over by Zionism, but of course, there's a lot of very religious Jews that like religion is their whole entire life. And these are the men you see dressed in long black coats, and they have like long side curls of their hair, right?
that's right.
Those guys are like, religious fanatics, and they're mostly anti-Zionist, right? So, but I'll talk a bit about the Torah.
Yeah,
So
please.
it's very, very clear in the Torah that we have a connection with that land, right? In the beginning of the Torah and the beginning of the story that we identify as our story, God says to Abraham, like the very first thing, just like out of the blue, you don't even know what happened before that. Just
Yeah,
God goes, Abraham, Abraham. And Abraham says, yes, and the first thing God says is, go forth from your land, from your father's home, from your birthplace, to the land that I will show you. And doesn't say what it is. And in our tradition, Abraham was like so faithful and so willing, like to follow God. He's like, okay, I'll do that. He didn't know where he was going. And that's very metaphorical, of
yeah,
course. But in the Torah, where God took him to was Canaan, and Canaan today is called Palestine, or the land of Israel. And
right.
I'm just making the point from the very, 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 very beginning. Like the first thing that like our oldest mythical ancestor ever heard from God was like, go to that place. Go to that place, right? And then after several generations, because of a famine, they went to Egypt. They ended up getting enslaved in Egypt. After 400 years, they got out of slavery. What did they do? Go back, to the land where we belong, that was promised, to Abraham's descendants by God, right? I'm making a case that like that land is so integral to Judaism. It's completely woven into it. Like if I say the morning prayers that we have, the afternoon prayers, the evening prayers, any prayer after I eat something and thank God for my food, every one of them, I'm like, thank you for the food. Thank you for the land that the food grew from. And take us back to the land that you promised to us. That's through and through and through Judaism. But I want to make a point that is conditional. And the condition is that we live in God's ways, that we walk in God's paths, that we have the kind of society that God requires of us. And within our religious framework of thinking, we're not there because we're not living the way God wanted us to live. So if you're asking me, like, what Where is like Zionism in the Torah? It's not Zionism, but it's a connection with the land of Israel.
I
And if we live a righteous life, I don't mean individually, personally me.
yes.
Judaism is very collective. It's very societal. Like if we do that writ large, then this I think is kind of mythical. I don't believe this in any tangible earthly way, but we will be taken back to that place where we belong. It's like a mythical idea. And
It,
part of that is it's not up to us to make that happen, which is what Zionism did, right? And those like ultra religious Jews oppose Zionism because they think Zionism is like a rebellion against the religion. And in fact, it was, because those early Zionists in Eastern Europe in the late 1900s, they just directly said, enough praying and waiting for God to take us back. We need to do it. We need to like take history in our own hands. We need to be actors on the stage of history and not wait for God to do anything. We're going to do it, you know? So it was a rebellion and a rejection of that part of Jewish religion.
so then where does it tie into the fact that you know this? Because of course you, like you said, you were born in Baltimore, Philadelphia, went to, you said rabbinic, is that how you said it?
Yeah, rabbinic school. Yeah, it's a
Exactly, right. So
seminary.
when did at some point you're like, you correlated the differences and you're like, I want no part of that Zionism movement. I'm a true Jew.
You're saying when?
Or was it just always instilled in you that these thought frames that you're having?
Well, the trajectory of my life is not unidirectional.
I believe
And
that, that's for
and
sure.
I'm saying there's a very I'll just say very briefly, I grew up with none of this. Both of my parents are Jewish. All four of my grandparents are Jewish. My 8 great grandparents are Jewish. If you just go back and back and back and back and back, but my parents and my grandparents and my great grandparents had nothing to do with religion or synagogues or any intentional Jewish thing. It was just like they just happened to be Jewish, whatever. That's what they were. I don't think they cared a whole lot about it. But for me, growing up, when I was a teenager, like in high school, in the world that I lived in, which was the late 1960s, and maybe just my personality or my soul, I had to like find myself. Who am I? How do I fit into the world? What do I belong to? What should I be doing while I'm here with this life? And I can say I searched and I found religion, and I got very attached to being Jewish. It meant so much to me. I valued it so much. And as a young person at that time, I also got very attached to the idea of Israel, a Jewish nation. Why am I here in America? I, I don't belong here. America doesn't belong to me. It's like a fortunate accident of history that my great grandparents managed to get there and I didn't get killed, in the
Of
Holocaust or a
course, yeah.
pogrom or this other horrible stuff. I grew up very comfortable in Baltimore. Good, that's nice, but I don't belong here. This is not my place. And I can imagine a lot, perhaps, of Palestinians growing up in Canada thinking like, okay, I'm in Canada, but it's not my place,
Yeah.
right? Where is my place? Where do I belong? So that's how I thought about Israel. And you just asked me, how did I get out of that? So I would say 40 or 50 years later,
Okay.
I got to the point where I thought, that's not really how it is. But it took me that long. And
And then
I,
yeah, it must have changed your whole trajectory of even your friends group. So that's what I was saying. Like, how
that's
was
right.
that? Because
That's right.
like I said, I grew up, and my parents still live in a very Jewish neighborhood here in Ottawa. The synagogue's right beside us.
Interesting.
Best relationship with our neighbors, and my mother wears a veil, right? And it's one of the. So I find now they're always coming and checking up on us, and even though they speak out, they feel, a lot of them feel the same way as you. Some of them are very low key because they're like, for some reason, automatically they throw a label on us, calling us self-hating Jews, which is absolutely ridiculous because they're obviously criticizing the Israeli government and the regime that's going on in the
Gotcha.
situation. But they're the
Gotcha.
most lovely, beautiful people. But they're also oppressing themselves, like they're oppressing other Jews, like the
That's
Zionism,
very
right?
true.
So that's why I
Oh,
was
it's very
asking,
true.
how much of a framework did it change for you?
Oh, it was actually huge for me.
Family
A
issues,
lot of this, actually, it's, yeah, there's like kind of political analysis and political ideology and all this, but a lot of it is actually just identity. I mean, I think underneath a lot of the politics is a lot of like psychology and our emotional lives. And so I identified for decades of my life with Israel. I always, from the very beginning, knew that there were really big problems of how Israel treated Palestinians, and I wanted to be part of like solving that, making it better, you know. So I was active with liberal Zionist groups, like in the USA, there's a group called J Street that's always pushing for, you know, two-state solution, stop the settlements. You know, we need a Jewish state next to a Palestinian state. The Jewish state has to treat the Palestinians equally, right? I was a big supporter of that. But I was saying that's part of my identity. And to kind of flip that or tip the balance for me was less than 10 years ago in my life, just saying, like, that's actually not, it's not right. It's not right to divide the land. It's not right to separate people. It's not right for Jews to rule over Palestinians and part of it. No, that shouldn't happen anywhere, right? The whole way that the state of Israel got started, it wasn't right. It was like just born in crime. You know, Israel got started by expelling the majority of the Palestinians from their homes and like erasing their villages, bulldozing them, dynamiting them. I've seen it with my own eyes, right?
yeah.
So, no, that's not right. So, I'm just saying, for me to change my mind and say no like that, you're asking me, was that like, you asked me about friends and family
Of
and
course.
my place in the world. I no longer fit in there, and I migrated to a different place. And I'm not trying to promote anybody else doing this, but like, instead of being bound up in a kind of a liberal Zionist world, which is very vibrant and really exists, and there's a lot of it actively now in Ottawa. There's a group right now called Standing Together, which has kind of gotten very active the last few months, but it's really a liberal Zionist organization, right?
What's their purpose of
I'm just like I'm like, no, you know, no, that's not me. Uh, I helped start organizations like that. I was like a leader in organizations like that. Um, Actually, just 2 days ago, there was a statement put out that I was going to sign it, and I read the whole thing, and in the fine print, not the fine print, but just as you read through it, it's like about like the Jewish state next to a Palestinian state, which first of all, is never going to happen, and I don't even think it's right. So for me to not sign that, I had to really think about it, and I decided no, you know. And there's like hundreds and hundreds of other rabbis have signed it. They're liberal Zionist rabbis, and I'm like, nope, nope, my name is not going on that list. But my name is, this is where I want to go with this. I am a member of Independent Jewish Voices. We are anti-Zionist Jews. We don't, I'll go stronger. We think the Jewish state of Israel needs to like end. It doesn't mean any Jewish people need to get hurt.
I love that you said that.
Nobody should get hurt. Nobody should have to like move away. No, we can work this out. We can live together. You said you're Lebanese Palestinian. We can live together.
I love it.
Oh, what a brilliant idea. Like, let's work on that. So we oppose there being a Jewish state. I don't care what you call it.
So then what would you
And
recommend
that's
is
like I said before, like, okay, it's like my community. It's like those people and me were very solid together and we're working on stuff together. And,
it's
so I'm not like a lonely guy, right? But it had to move me from one big, strong, super well funded camp, if you know what I mean,
I know what
to
you mean.
another one that's much smaller. But I think if you come back 10 years from now, you'll see that, we will grow in numbers and in influence. And
Well, God bless you guys. I hope that you guys do because it's we just had an incredible conversation, me and a few of my Jewish friends the other day, and we were having this discussion. And they were like, "What do you think of this situation?" And I said, first of all, I don't think the Jews should go anywhere. You guys have been here for so long with us, regardless. To be very honest, till this day, a lot of my olive oil gets sent back to here, right? And from a lot of them is from they're being produced by Jews such as yourselves that are not Zionists that love one another. I don't think they need to go anywhere. I just think
well,
the
good.
apartheid needs to end and give them back their land and live coexistently like we've always done.
Well, I think that technical details of that are going to be hard to work out. Let's
Yeah,
be real,
100% for
right?
sure.
But I also think where there's a will, there's a way.
Absolutely.
And we're all smart enough, wise enough. If our hearts are open and loving, we can work out all that stuff. I want to mention another organization quite seriously and hope that people will look into it. It's called the One Democratic State Initiative.
The One Democratic State
One
Initiative.
Democratic State Initiative. It has a website. It has Instagram, all that stuff. And I'd like to talk about that more so that people can just have that concept in their mind.
Please do.
And the One Democratic State Initiative is supported by Jewish Israelis and Palestinians, some of whom live there, some of whom don't. Um, I'll just say I was really pleased. I was at the McMaster University student intifada the day before
God
yesterday.
bless
I
them.
was I was speaking there. I did like a teach-in, and I mainly talked about the question you asked about Judaism and Zionism. Talked about it like for an hour and a half. It was pretty interesting. Maybe really like 100
How do you?
students
I hate to
sitting in
cut
the
you off,
grass.
but
Wait,
how do
wait,
you?
wait, wait, wait. I'm going all over the place here. Let me get to the point I
Because I was
wanted to
about to be
make.
like, you're jumping to another one here for me.
But hold on. So there was a Palestinian woman, I guess maybe 50 years old, a Palestinian Canadian woman, I have to say. We were talking, and she brought up that she's involved with the One Democratic State Initiative, and I'm like, whoa, me too. And we need to talk about that more so people can even conceptualize it and hold it as like a vision. That's where we want to go with it. And I think if we have that, we can move toward it. And if all we hear about is like actually Canadian government policy is like two-state solution, they've been talking about that really since the UN partition vote in 1947. But first of all, it was unfair and wrong to even do that. Second, it's how's that working out for us? Not, you know, So we
Yeah.
need to do better than thinking we're going to like divide. That's just not how it should be.
I would love to. So when you went to Israel, that you saw firsthand, because a lot of people, especially the Zionist movements and a lot on the news, they try to tell you the apartheid doesn't exist, but we know very well that it does.
It's totally
You can't
pervasive.
even you can't hide it anymore. What was your experience? Did you when you saw the difference of treatment and towards the Palestinians and Jews such as yourself?
Sure, sure. So first of all, everything is very segregated. Palestinians actually aren't allowed to live in places that are populated by Jews,
It's
right?
mind blowing that it's happening at this time in
Right?
2024.
The kids don't go to school together, right? And it's like, and I mean, just let's be real and clear. The Palestinians who live inside 48 and are Israeli citizens have a disproportional high representation, like in the medical profession. There's many doctors, right? But that doesn't mean that there isn't, apartheid. I don't like labels are never like completely good, right? But there's thorough discrimination in virtually everything. So, okay, I don't want to get into like talking about that too much, but it's
No, it's
it's
okay. I was
it's
just saying your
it's all
experience
over
on
the
this.
place. And the only way Israel can be what they like to call a democracy is by making sure that the Palestinians are always a very small minority. So within the kind of defined state of Israel, which I just called 48, Palestinians are about 20% of the citizens, right? So
Right.
they're never going to get political influence. There are political parties that are mostly Palestinian, uh, but no coalition that'll ever make a government will bring them into it. They're always left outside, right? They're not even like the opposition. They're like I could talk about this a lot. And then
Yeah.
meanwhile, that government is ruling over something like 5 million Palestinians who are not citizens. They live in the West Bank. And it sounds crazy to say this, but also in Gaza, right?
Yeah.
2 million Palestinians in Gaza were and still are ruled over by Israel, even though Israel withdrew, 17 years ago, its military from there and took out the settlers who took over about a third of the land in Gaza, took them out. But Israel's completely controlled Gaza ever since then. Anyway, just go back to that point about apartheid.
Of course.
So you have something like 7 million Jews ruling over 7 million Palestinians, and 2 million of those Palestinians were given citizenship, which gives Israel this kind of ability to say that it's democratic because they have a vote, but they're never going to have
Because you're saying
real
you can't
influence.
even be in opposition.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And even the reason why the Gaza Strip exists as a thing, like the Gaza Strip was never a thing. The Gaza Strip did not exist. If you look on a map from 1948, Gaza is a city that's been there for thousands of years, and it's been a very multicultural city. It's a city like on trading routes from Egypt, like to Turkey and to the Golden Crescent and
Yeah.
blah blah blah. Gaza is really an important city that goes back. It's in the Bible, like Jaffa. But the Gaza Strip was formed, like a line was drawn to like separate it from everything else in 1949 when Israel had this armistice agreement to like end the war. And what had happened is the Israeli forces, the brutal military, pushed Palestinians out of their homes and their towns and even their cities, like Beersheba. In English, it's Beersheba or Beersheba. Cities, there was city Isdud, entire cities. There were no Jews lived there. Tens of thousands of Palestinians lived there. They got pushed out and they got pushed toward the sea and toward Egypt. And the Egyptian army managed to hold on to the area around Gaza. So all these Palestinians were pushed out of their homes, hundreds of thousands of them, went there. Many of them were killed and the rest fled. And that's where they went.
My family is one of them. Yeah.
Well, I'm really sorry. I'm really, really sorry. But then in 1949, so that Israel could be a Jewish democratic state, they drew a line that cut that part of Palestine off. And they created the Gaza Strip, and it was administered by Egypt. I'm just making a point. I'm saying about apartheid and what they call democracy. The only way Israel could be a democracy for Jews is by kicking out hundreds of thousands of Palestinians so that they wouldn't be citizens.
Which is a great point that you've just made, to be very honest.
Well, people don't know this stuff. That's why I'm talking about it.
Which I love.
I didn't know this stuff until the last few years. I learned something about a month ago that I never knew. I have to say, I learned this from Ilan Pappé, who's an Israeli historian, and reading his book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine, flipped me. It changed my life. If somebody were to ask me, what's one book you read that really changed you?
Yeah.
The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. I could no longer believe in the myths and stories that I had believed in for my whole life. But I listened to a lecture by him. I don't want to go on too long about this, but there was a Palestinian city called, I think it was called Majdal, maybe Majdal Iskalan or something like that. Several tens of thousands of people living there. And when Israel conquered that whole area in 1948, those people did not flee. They were surrounded. They stayed in their homes. Actually, Israel didn't invade it and didn't kill people. They just kind of surrounded it and conquered it. And then after that armistice, Israel was stuck with all those people inside it. And according to itself, it should have made them citizens. And that was really problematic. So they drove all those people out of their homes long after the fighting stopped. They pushed those people out into Gaza. So they arrived in Gaza maybe a year after everybody else did.
It's mind-blowing, to be very honest.
I didn't know this until a month ago.
That's a story I just found out from you.
I just said it 3 times. I didn't know this. I've been there. Another thing I didn't know until I started reading, what in Hebrew we call Beersheva. Beersheva is, again, it's in the Torah. Abraham lived there, right? The reason it's even called Beersheva in the Torah, the Be'er is a well, and he dug a well, and Sheva, it means an oath, and he took an oath. So Beersheva, it's an ancient Hebrew name. In Arabic, it's called Beersaba. I didn't know that no Jews lived there at all in 1948. I've been there, and to me, for decades, I experienced it only as a Jewish city, full of Jews, speaking Hebrew. Jewish university, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, there's a few Bedouins that live around there, and, when they need to go shopping, they come into town, and that's where they buy their stuff. But it's a Jewish city. You get what I'm saying.
I get what you're saying.
Here in Hamilton, in the last month or two, I've met people whose father and uncle were driven out of there. They're Palestinians, right?
Yeah.
Their grandmother died on the way as they were walking to Gaza. And his father survived as an 8-year-old boy and lived with his father, this man's grandfather, in Gaza. And that's the entire Palestinian population of that Palestinian city was expelled. The ones that weren't killed were expelled. They fled. And just like we're seeing in Gaza these last few months, where seriously Israel targets the doctors, the university presidents and professors, the writers. You know what I mean? I'm talking about the people that help the society function well. They did this in 48 as well. They killed the mukhtars of the villages. They killed the teachers. They knew who these people were. They researched it. There's a thing you can learn about. It was called Plan Dalet, which just means Plan B.
I've heard of it. I think it was a book about that.
I learned about this from Ilan Pappé's book, The Ethnic Cleansing of Palestine. It blew my mind. I just have to say I was aware I told you I was like one of these Zionists who wants to everybody live together and we'll all be good. I never wanted to hurt or oppress Palestinians or steal their land, as I knew did happen. But I did not know about Plan Dalet until I read that book. And what's in that book, he's a historian. Everything in there is documented from contemporaneous sources, from minutes of the meetings of like the Jewish agency that planned this, from the diaries of David Ben Gurion, who was like running the thing, from the actual like notes that these guys took in the field. And they planned, they surveyed like every Palestinian village. They had maps, they knew where people lived, they knew who were the influential leaders, like in each village, that when the time came, like Jewish militias could go in there, grab those guys, drag them out, and kill them.
Crazy.
And all the other people would flee. And that's what they did. It's like they decapitated the society. So this is, you just asked me some question about apartheid, and
No, I love your answer.
that's a word. It's a word that's borrowed from South Africa. I don't want to get picky about definitions. What is apartheid? Is that really apartheid?
No, I got it.
It's thorough, pervasive discrimination and oppression, and it shouldn't be. And I'll just say, Jewish people have more of a responsibility than other people
I agree.
to set this right, to use our positions, our voices, who we are, to turn this around. And I just want to say, I think that means ending the state of Israel. That doesn't mean ending any Jews. I don't want any Jews to get hurt.
That's right.
They're my cousins,
That's right.
But that system that is an apartheid system.
No, I absolutely agree with everything you just said, and I think that what you said it beautifully about how that you guys do have a responsibility. Is because me speaking, like I said, I grew up with Jews, and very similar. By the we're monotheistic, just as them. You know what I mean? And a lot of
Sure.
the interesting factors is when I was speaking to people such as like yourself, they said a lot of they've been fed themselves so much propaganda. So when I was told this years and years ago, I understand that even they are subjected to this propaganda that we are the bad guys. We did this, we did that to them. So I completely understand where they're coming from. And at the same time, I love that you said that you guys have a responsibility, because I wanted to ask you, when it comes down to organizations like AIPAC and CIJA, how much influence do they really have against this movement? That's what I really wanted to talk about.
What do you mean? How much influence do they have?
I don't think people really understand how much they influence things that are happening today, especially in politics.
Oh my God. Well, they totally control the government regarding these issues. Right? I want to be really clear about that qualification. CIJA doesn't control the Canadian government, but CIJA absolutely controls the Canadian government on many levels of government as it relates to Israel, Palestine, you could say the Middle East, making up scare stories about anti-Semitism and then getting laws passed under the guise of defending Jews. CIJA has like total control, right? Just look at what Justin Trudeau said yesterday, the day before, commemorating the Holocaust. But what he talks about is he uses the language of anti-Semitism, then the language of Jews not being safe today. This is all because of, you mentioned CIJA. I also want to make a little bit longer list. B'nai B'rith Canada is more extreme than CIJA and much more crude in its methods.
Extremely crude.
Right. And then there's another group that's called Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center that has exercised tremendous influence, even control over schools and the court system. And that's how it is. And you also mentioned AIPAC. So AIPAC is in the U.S., and AIPAC, raises more than like $100 million, and it swings elections. It got actually there was a Jewish member of Congress named Andy Levin from Michigan, from the outskirts of Detroit,
Yeah.
who was in Congress. He was one of the most outspoken Jews in Congress. I'll say he was a good liberal Zionist. He wasn't against Israel. Maybe kind of like Bernie Sanders. He could say some of the truth.
I love
And
that he said that it's not anti-Semitic to
that's not
to.
even what I said. I said Andy Levin wasn't against Israel. He wasn't anti-Israel. He was talking about the truth of what goes on there. For example, Andy Levin supported bills in the U.S. Congress to condition U.S. military aid to Israel on Israel obeying already existing U.S. law that prohibits military aid to any force that violates human rights.
Yeah,
It's called the Leahy Amendment.
yeah.
That gets completely ignored. So every year there's a bill in Congress specifically that, Israel too should follow that law. So Andy Levin supported that. I'm just making a point that, let me get to the point. The point was AIPAC funded someone to run against him in the last congressional primary election in the Democratic Party in his district and got him defeated. So they supported somebody not Jewish, who's very compliant, who will do what they want. They gave her millions of dollars and defeated Andy Levin. You asked me something about AIPAC's influence.
Yeah.
Right? You mentioned CIJA in Canada
Yeah.
and AIPAC in the U.S. We, independent Jewish voices, are trying to push back. We are pushing back.
Yeah, you guys are doing
We're at least making it clear that they don't speak for the Jews of Canada. They speak for a certain band in the spectrum. The spectrum of Jewish opinion is really big. Lots of different ideas among us Jews. Like I said, 2 Jews, 3 opinions. CIJA is a part of that band, but they have tremendous budget.
Yeah.
They have dozens of full-time staff people, and they're able to influence the media, and they're able to influence our government. And AIPAC does that in the States, and Jewish Voice for Peace and other groups are also pushing back on that.
It's incredible how they're very open about it at this point, that they're not even hiding it. Like even AIPAC they put out a post on X saying that I think it was 17 of the congressional members that were funded by AIPAC have won, and it said it's a good thing to support Israel. And then right there, it's blatantly screaming to the people that these are foreign controlled entities at this point. How's this happening just in broad daylight?
Well, there's 2 things I want to say. One, if somebody says, "Oh, these Jewish organizations are controlling Congress," that's deemed to be anti-Semitic, although it's true.
Yeah.
Right? I feel like I can say that because I'm Jewish. I'm a rabbi. I'm also retired. I'm not going to get fired by somebody doxing me, right? But I imagine if you say that, you'd get a lot of trouble. So I said it. That's one thing. And then another thing, here in Canada right now, we're hearing a lot about this parliamentary inquiry or something or another into foreign influence. And they're talking about China and Russia. The country that they're not talking about is Israel. And CIJA can get candidates for the NDP for parliament, like just kicked right out. That's happened, right? They can just pull the chain. I'm picking on the NDP because I'm very active in the NDP. Of course, the liberals, conservatives wouldn't go near it. So talk about foreign interference in Canadian politics. It's so obvious, but it never gets talked about.
Yeah.
Actually, there's a journalist named Eve Engler who's analyzed the records of lobbying. To do lobbying in Ottawa, you have to register as a lobbyist, and you have to write down, like, who did you meet with, and there's like records of lobbying. That's the open lobbying, I'd say, the kind of legitimate lobbying that's on record. So Eve Engler analyzed the lobbying records, and the most active lobbying of Canadian members of parliament, ministers, heads of Canadian government agencies is the Zionist lobby, more than oil and gas, more than big pharma, more than all the banks,
which is a big deal.
more than, hospitals and healthcare. And, the number one biggest, most active lobby in Canada is the Zionist lobby. That's just statistics.
Yeah. So when it comes, because I know you said you're at Masters. One of the things that you said you were at the university, correct?
Oh, McMaster, yeah.
McMaster's, yes, sorry.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
one other thing I wanted to bring up is how the movement expanded for the encampments from the UK, and it's made such a massive wave in North America. When you were at McMaster's, did you see anything like that?
Oh, yeah, that's why I went there. Are you saying, is there an encampment at McMaster?
Yes.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
And what was your interaction? Because a lot of the times now they're very pushing the envelope that the pro-Palestinians are very belligerent and violent.
No, it's just a lie. That's a total lie.
So
No.
what was your experience?
Belligerent, violent people are Zionists come and attack these encampments that are totally peaceful. There's no reason for them to not be. And the police, who foolish, arrogant university administrators have called on, go back a few weeks now to
Yeah.
Columbia University, right? Minouk Sharif called in the police, and that made the confrontation. Same thing in UCLA.
Yeah.
So the environment and the encampment, and I follow this really closely, like a lot of different encampments, and I get communications from them and from people that visit them.
Yeah.
It's very focused on Palestine and on Gaza, but I also think in terms of like just the atmosphere and what's going on there, they really have an idea of themselves as like really being part of creating like a new world where people will be cooperative and respectful and sharing, getting along with each other,
Yeah.
learning from each other,
Because they're trying to
kind of
paint.
non-hierarchical. Like, it's like a little, I come from a generation where we had like Woodstock or things, communes, back when I was that age, when I was 18, 19, 20,
They're still young, basically, what you're saying.
we thought we were going to be creating a new world by these things that we did. And it was beautiful. It was wonderful. And I think that's what's going on with these students. So they're provoked into action by the atrocities that they see, the horrors that are going on, and the complicity of their schools. That's what's moving them.
I think they're extremely.
But if you ask me about the tone or the feeling, what's going on there? Oh, it's beautiful. I'm going back there when I finish this. I'm going to head back over there because
That's
it's so
amazing.
nice to be there.
I wanted to talk about. I wanted to talk about the fact that a lot of us have actually seen your videos and found out who you were when you were protesting the sale of illegal settlements of the West Bank. Actually, how did that just pop up on your radar? That specific in Hamilton.
Well, I'm actually tuned into a lot of like kind of Jewish media. So I get things like ads for real estate sales in a synagogue, except that the real estate is in Palestine. No, how did that pop up in my? Yeah, I saw that, and then I felt, like I said, I felt a responsibility to expose it. If I only did that, that would be something, rather than it flying under the radar. And the only people who know that it's happening are people who think it's a good thing. I want to expose it.
Yeah.
I want to problematize it. I don't want it to like be business as usual.
Which is incredible.
And
I'm very grateful that you did, because a lot of us didn't even know that it was going on at that time.
and then oppose it. I said expose it, but also oppose it. Try to shut it down.
Yeah.
You know, and there's so much stuff like that.
I
That's
really
what these
respect what you were
students are
saying.
doing. The students are talking about the complicity of their universities. So that means the universities have big endowment funds, some of them in the hundreds of millions of dollars, and they invest where their financial advisors think they'll get the best
Yeah.
return on their investment or whatever. And some of that is weapons companies, right? So the universities are invested in companies building the weapons that are killing people in Gaza, and so the students are exposing that and opposing it.
I think they're heroes, to be very honest. The way they're being shunned, the way the Zionist movement and AIPAC and CIJA and everybody are attacking them, and from arresting and rewriting
Yep,
laws.
yep,
Yeah, and what I was saying before, when I said Bernie Sanders, what I really appreciated Bernie Sanders saying was the fact that it's not anti-Semitic to criticize Netanyahu and the government, because if that's what you're saying, there's a democracy, then you should be able to criticize them. So I really appreciated him saying
sure,
that, because
sure.
it's incredible how they say you're anti-Semitic for everything. And it's funny enough, because when you actually look at the definition of Semite, Arabs are Semitic. Arabic language is Semitic. You know what I
There's
mean?
no question that Arabs are Semitic, but
Yeah.
that's not what the word means. It's a weird word that comes from Germany in the late 1800s. Um, it's the word anti-Semitic means anti-Jewish. It's not about Semites. There were German racists, German anti-Jewish people. There was one particular guy who coined that term, and for him, Jews didn't belong in Germany. The Germans were like kind of pure Aryans or something like that.
Yeah.
And the way he could make a point that Jews don't belong there, instead of using the word Jew hatred, he called us Semites. So like we don't belong there, so anti-Semitic. The word means anti-Jewish. I think it's a inaccurate and a bad argument to say there's something about Arabs are Semites too. So no, that's just not what the
I
word
love
means.
that you brought that up, for the fact that a lot of people don't know that, and such as myself. So
Yeah. So actually, Hebrew language and Arabic language are so close to each other, right? And even though Jews have been scattered around the world for more than 2,000 years, like we see our roots
yeah,
as being there. That's where we came from. I don't doubt that at all. Anybody that does doubt that is just being an idiot. So in this, anyway, no, there's other Semitic people as well and Semitic languages. Anyway, you know what? Seriously, all this stuff about classifying people, I think that's just all in our heads,
yeah, it's getting bad at this
right?
point.
People in Ethiopia speak Semitic languages,
Yep.
right?
So what's
But
Rabbi
so,
David Mivasair's next steps
oy,
for the things he's doing now?
well, I appreciate you asking. I am doing everything I can to support people in Gaza and try to help some people who want to get out of Gaza to be able to do that. And that's what I've been doing more than anything else that I do. I, I beg for money, and I can do that right now.
Yeah, please do.
Ask you to
Please do.
seriously ask you to put up like a link to my GoFundMe. So I have raised a lot of money, close to $200,000, and to help families in Gaza. I'm helping about a dozen families that are almost all women with children who can't buy food, and they have to buy food and water. For a while, they were buying tents, which are just like plastic sheets.
Yeah.
For a while there, they needed to buy warm clothes because they fled their homes literally with the clothes on their backs, and they took their children with them. Carry one child, 3 or 4 other children walk with you. And then it got cold and they didn't have their warm clothes. So I'm just saying, I've been raising money and sending it to them. And after doing that for months, there's several people I got very, very connected with. And one of them is a young woman named Mesa, who has 2 little children, and she's basically raising them by herself. They're very little. One of them's 2 years old. The other one's 4 years old. Her house was bombed. She grabbed her kids and she just ran. I was taking care of her for months. I got a lot of other people to take care of her. There's a whole team of about a dozen people taking care of her. And I'll just say, about 2 months ago, I'm like, why are we sending her a few $100s so she can eat? If she wants to get out of there, which she did, because she was just getting bombed and they're sniping and just breathing dust from all the bombing, getting sick, and she just wanted to get out of there. So we raised $20,000.
Wow.
And sent it to an extremely corrupt organization in Egypt that got her and her kids out about 3 weeks ago. And they're in Cairo. They're in an apartment. And people that I've been organizing and bringing into this, we've gotten 4 families out. And there are other families that are we're not leaving. We're staying here. This is our place and we're staying. We're not leaving. There's a young woman right now. Her name is Arij. She's 24 years old. She's not married, but she has younger siblings.
Yeah.
And I sent her over $500 yesterday so that they could eat, so they could get food. So what's next for me? So there's that young woman I told you about before named Mesa. She left her husband behind in Gaza. They had to make a decision what to do. We didn't have enough money for him. He would have cost about $7,000 more, and we didn't have it. And they made a decision she and the children would go without him. So I want to get him out so he could be with her. She misses him so much. And it's very hard for her without him, and I want to get him out. Sorry. And then there's this other guy I've been helping for about 5 years. And he has a wife and he has 3 kids, and I want to get him out. And he wants to get out. So I hope my next move is raise enough money to get them out.
I'd love to help you, David.
I just can't stand it.
I would love nothing more but to help you on that journey. I
just can't stand it. This whole thing is so horrible. I can't stand it. And I know the last few months, there's thousands and thousands and thousands of GoFundMes. Everybody's begging for money. And actually, what happened yesterday? The Israeli military took over the Rafah crossing. So if somebody listening to this sends me $100,000 and tells me, okay, get out 5 families, I don't know that we can even do that anymore. I don't know. We don't know. There's so much uncertainty, but that's what there's so much that we need to do these days. There's the political side, but I said to you earlier, I've been doing political stuff for 50 years, and I don't see where it's getting us. You know what? I'm going to wrap this up. This has been going on a long time. I want to say something that I really think, and I say to people, I am so informed by the Holocaust and what I know about the Holocaust and people I met who lived through it.
Yeah.
They're mostly gone now. But I want to say that no one was able to stop the Nazis. There were decent people like you and me living in Germany or living in Poland or living in Lithuania, Romania, and they couldn't stop the Nazis. But what they could do was they could help some Jew. They could find a Jew and help them. And they did, and that's how people survived. And they were just say a Polish housewife walking past a ghetto with a loaf of bread in her arms. And she'd throw that bread over the wall. And some Jew on the other side would get that bread and they could eat it. And that's what's inspired me. make me feel like absolutely like kind of like I have like generational karma. I have to do this. I have been trying like for 50 years to make things better. I haven't done a thing. Nothing's come of it. But I know, like this man I just mentioned, his name's Rizek. He told me he couldn't feed his kids. So I sent him $50 like 5 years ago.
Yeah.
And then a month later, he couldn't feed his kids. I sent him another $50, right? So like, I know you get what I'm saying.
Absolutely.
We have to do all the political stuff, everything we can, but at the same time, people are just suffering so bad, and some of us do have the ways and means to relieve that suffering even for one day. You know, if I send them $50 or 100 or 500 or whatever, and
Yep.
they can feed their kids, I don't know that they're not going to get killed that night. Did I waste my money?
No.
Okay, anyway, there's just so much here.
David,
It's just so much.
I appreciate you taking your time out of your busy day. I love and respect everything that you just said. Honestly, I have tremendous amount of respect for you. I want you to send us the GoFundMe page. I'd love to be
I'll
able
do
to help
that.
you out with that. Honestly,
I'll do that.
yeah, please. It's very noble what you're doing. Honestly, you're making my heart shatter because it's something that's very near and dear to us. And I've actively donated this entire time.
I
And
believe you, sure.
yeah, and I would love to be
I,
able to be part of that.
I feel bad asking Palestinians because I know like every Palestinian is supporting their own family. I
We're
don't ask.
so happy to hear people of your caliber, especially in terms of you're a rabbi and what you say, because it means the world to us because we've been demonized for so long. And I saw our whole world flip after 9/11 as a Muslim myself, right? Especially with Islamophobia and all that. So it's very interesting that when you see a man like you come to our defense, it's like
Well,
you see we're not monsters.
you should never have to say that. It makes me sick that you have to say such a thing. It's all like a big scheme. It's a
I found
plot, and things are changing.
yeah, yeah. And God bless you, and God bless everybody that's doing something towards these changes. If I'm ever in Hamilton, I'd love to pay you a visit. Vice
Okay.
versa. If you're in Ottawa, come see me. Everybody, it was a pleasure. Thank you so much for coming on, Rabbi David.
Thank you.
And hopefully we'll talk in the near future.
Good. Next time I'll ask you some
There
questions.
you go. Please do.
No, all seriousness. I know you want to wrap it up, but it would be amazing to hear about your family story.
Yeah, I would love
Just
nothing
that.
more. I would love to.
Don't need to. Your grandparents, your parents, what all this stuff. It'll be really amazing to do another one of these and let me interview you.
Yeah, you know what? Let's do a part two.
Take
And
it seriously. Take it seriously. That would be fascinating for me.
you
And
know
I
what?
think
That's
a lot of
incredible.
people would learn a lot from you.
I would love to. I would love to. Let's schedule something in for the
Sure.
near future. Let's do something like that. I'd
Sure.
love that.
Sure. Good. Okay.
You're
God
amazing.
bless you.
God bless you. See you later,
Bye.
Dave.
Bye.